age group. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And basically, these are the things that I imagine that all of you guys are dealing with as a pain point for your family and for this age group. So the big one, the one that is in everybody's mind, this idea of returning back to school, and depending whether you're in charter / public school and or in a private school, the majority of the kids will start in an online type format of schooling. Not all schools are going online, but some are. So number one, please remember that it's not homeschooling. Okay? You are not homeschooling. Homeschooling is when a parent looks for a curriculum, learns about the curriculum, and actually teaches the children school. You are doing virtual learning. The school district and or your private school has chosen the curriculum, and they have chosen an online platform and some requirements for your child to learn, and it's up to them to teach your child. But Lena, in March, it was a mess, and my child wouldn't sit down, and they weren't paying attention, and they were looking around, and they were fighting with me. That's for those of you that have children under 8. Yep, that is true. That is true, right? So if you're not teaching them school, what you are doing as a parent is setting the routine and setting the ability to have this habit of waking up, having breakfast, going to a place, a particular place. So tip number one, make sure that you set up a particular place where they are going to be on screen. Couches are not good choices. Beds are not good choices. Make sure that they choose a spot. Now, for some of your children, they're very, very wiggly, right? They move a lot. So for those little wiggly ones, work with them. You know, where can they wiggle? Maybe they need to sit on, on the floor with one of those like $7 IKEA tables that are tall enough so that they can type in there, but they still can wiggle and they still can sit on the ground. Or maybe they need a desk. But be creative and be individual about where your child will do their schoolwork. It has to be, allow them to have a place, a setting, somewhere where they go. If at all possible, if you're working from home while your child is on the computer and your child can see you, that's better, right? Especially children 2nd grade and younger, right? Like first kinder, it's very, very hard for them to stay focused on their own, and if you could be sitting nearby doing your work, if you can plan with your job that you do your computer work that's not meetings or anything in the time slot that the school is doing online, that would be my number one choice. But if you cannot do that, make sure that every once in a while you get up, maybe every, I don't know, anywhere between every 15 to 25 minutes, and you go and you pat them on the shoulder or kiss them on the head or do something so they feel and see you. The difference between, a big difference between the classroom and the online learning is the bodies around them, right? So being in a vacuum without the bodies around them, without a teacher that is kind of walking around, and a lot of teachers walk around the classroom, touch your kid, and then your kid goes back to what they're doing, right? So you don't have to recreate that, right? But you have to be conscious that that's what's different. Also, please, everyone, trust. It's not going to be as hard. So I'm talking to everybody's brain. Ready? Parent brain. It's not going to be as hard as it was in March to transition into the remote learning and into the online learning. Why? One, we're not doing it the first time. This is the second time that we do it. 3, Believe it or not, the public school system did a really great job of finding a platform that they think that they can maintain and they can have throughout this school year. Because this is a school year that's going to be about starting and stopping, starting and stopping, starting and stopping. We would be lying to ourselves if we didn't think that, you know, some schools are going to have to open and close based on children and or teachers and or faculty and or administration testing positive for COVID. It's just kind of one of those things that it may happen. So just expect to have a lot of start-stop. But Lena, isn't that horrible for children? Should I just pick online altogether so they don't have to go through the back and forth? Depends. If your child does horrible in transitions and doesn't like it when things change that quickly, yeah, choosing online might be for the entire school year might be a safe route for you because of that, because them going on and off, on and off, on and off of going to school or not going to school would be more disruptive for them. But that super flexible kiddo that kind of comes and goes and it's not that big a deal, and you still want them to have the schoolhouse experience, it's okay to do both. I want everybody to stop concentrating on what they're not getting and this possibility of how horrific this is and how the pandemic has given us so much grief, because it has. And I want you to start focusing on informing, narrating, and making sense to your children of what it means to live through a stressful time. They can understand and they can discuss with you how stressful this is. It's okay to let them know, you know what, it isn't fair, buddy, that you don't get to go to school. That's true. But for today, let's figure out a fun place to put your computer and your school and your supplies and your books and all that kind of business. Another thing, for the first 2 weeks back, right? So for those of you that are in public school, that means the week of August 31st and then the first week of September. Allow this to be messy. Allow them to be annoyed. Allow them to give you the Spanish mala cara, like, I hate this. This isn't fair. This, everybody, this we do not parent. We do not tell them, have a better attitude. If you had a better attitude, this would. If you don't talk to the mala cara and the whining and the complaining, as long as their little bodies are moving to the area that you set up for them to do their online work, they're doing it. That in the 5 to 10-year-old, that ew, this isn't fair. I hate you, mommy. Why are you making me do this? Nobody else has to do this. I used to act, right? That is normal. That is them expressing frustration tolerance. That gets smaller and smaller and smaller with age. All of you right now, as I am talking, has that little tiny person going, Lena, I don't want to set up a space. Why are you giving me more work? But the difference between you and your child is that you're doing it in here, you're keeping it quiet, you're knowing not to put it in the chat and complain to me because you're an adult. In children between 5 and 10, one of the major primary markers of development is to tolerate frustration. Between 5 and 7, they're the ones that cry and fall apart and still tantrum maybe once or twice a week, right? Between 7 and 8, they're the ones that are sassy and they roll their eyes when they don't like that you ask them to do something. That's what frustration tolerance looks like. And the between 8 and 10, they debate with you, or they're just like, and then they go about and do their thing. So again, if they are sitting there like this, angry that they're on their screen, or if they are angry that you told them to get off the video game, that's not something to parent. In your mind, you have to remember that's what frustration tolerance looks like in the school age years. That's what practicing delay of gratification looks like in the school aged years. Now I have to tolerate what it makes me feel when my child does that. And usually what it makes you feel is you feel rejected and you feel like you're in conflict. So that's why you want to end it in them. But I much rather you come back to you, which you can handle and you can manage, and think about, okay, I don't have to scream at my kid because they have mala cara, and I just have to calm down. It's okay that they hate me right now, but right now they have to be on school, right? Now, so for the first 2 weeks, all you have to do is set up the place, set up the time, and walk them back. Whether they do the work, whether they talk when the teacher asks them questions, whether they're looking up in the sky and going like this, we allow that person inside of the computer that is there for them to say something, and we allow them to, not get it finished. If the school gives you extra work, so you have to set up the time of the online learning, the active online learning, and they may or may not have home learning or homework. I'm uncertain if they're going to do that. Also add that to your routine. Homework in the school age years. We should have been doing this before the pandemic, but we'll do it now. You set up a time in the routine, maybe after lunch, after they relax for a little bit, maybe watch a TV show, and you set up a time, and then whatever they finish, they finish. If they don't finish all of it, leave it alone. And that was true before pandemic times. It's even more true now, and now you can email your teacher, learn to advocate for yourself and your child and say, we're getting used to this. The home learning is going to be difficult. So I find that I could only do an extra 30 to 40 minutes of work. And the rest of the time, I'm going to do my home life. Thank you so much, teacher. It's okay if they don't get their grade. Please allow this year for you to not do school perfectly. And one school year is not a life sentence for your child. It's how you narrate and explain this time that's going to make or break the child. Now, I've sort of spoken about this. The very, very, very hard thing about this age group is their black and white thinking. They put everything into buckets of good and bad, yes and no, and pleasure, pain. So it is important to know that when you're talking to this age group, to the 5 to 10-year-old, they're very rigid in the way that they think, and they get stuck on ideas. So for example, you tell your child that they can play with the neighborhood friends, but they can only do, 3 things. But then your child gives you a 4th, but they can't do that because it's not safe for this COVID time. So you tell them, no, we can't do that. Remember, we're only going to do these 3 things. Then you go to the play date and then they lose their mind. That's an example of rigidity of thought, right? And in that moment, it's not, stop it. Look at what you're doing. Look, you're making your friend upset. No, in that moment, when they get stuck in an idea, when they get stuck in their black and white thinking, the best thing to say to somebody in this age group is, wow, buddy, you're getting stuck on an idea. You're only thinking of one way to do this. Let's calm down. And let's think about the different ways that we can do this, the different ways that you can play, the different snacks that you can have, the different ways that you can brush your teeth, right? Because sometimes that's the big thing, like the black and white thinking. You guys are trying to debate with them for them to see it, to see the gray of it or the ambiguity of it, but they can't. So the more concrete you could be with your examples, the better. So let me give you an example that you're going to be in with the remote learning. But I don't want to do school on the computer. I don't want to do school on the computer, right? And they're going to get stuck, right? And in that moment, you have to say, you're right. It's so hard and it is unfair. But right now, we're doing this to stay safe. At this time of COVID, it is important for you guys to explain that the choices that we're making that are not perfect, that are not the way that they used to be, it's because those are the things that we are doing to stay safe. And as often as possible, if you can send that message one more time, I want everybody to stop thinking about all the things that we're losing and we're grieving, and put yourself in the position of like, how am I narrating? How am I explaining this time to my child? And how am I explaining? And you don't have to explain it pretty. There's absolutely zero pretty about this. It's uncertain. It's sometimes scary. Sometimes it's fun because a lot of you guys have gotten really fun. You've been watching movies on the couch and eating silly things that you didn't eat before. And maybe you've had, like sleeping in the living room. But it's also really, that has been stressful because your kids are watching you, kind of make up your mind about how to keep everybody safe. So whatever it is, remember that your children in this time, in this hardship, they are learning what it means to deal with uncertainty and to deal with hardship. And this is why a lot of you are feeling so scared and so crazy, because you yourself have not been able to talk to yourself about what it means to you to deal with hardship and uncertainty. So besides all these pain points that I'm talking about and the kids, I must ask you to sit and wonder, how do I manage hardship? How do I manage uncertainty? What am I doing to handle this anxious and stressful time? Because that is what your child is currently practicing, managing, and perfecting. And in my child development book, there's nothing more important in the world of adulthood than to know how to handle uncertainty and hardship and stress in the safest way possible. So yes, they're not spending time with peers. True. Yes, they're not getting the experience of being in the classroom and having projects and doing musical theater and doing sports and doing after school activity. Yes. However, they are mastering this beautiful skill of managing and dealing with hardship. And again, I know that that's both an amazing opportunity, but it's also terrifying. So, and I'm saying this because I want all of you to feel normal, because that's what's bubbling up for you, right? So challenging behavior and defiance. Okie dokie. The no's, the pushback, the talking back at you. Stop today. You're going to hate me. Some of you are going to hate me. Ready? Stop today talking about the behavior and wonder, what are they feeling that caused them to do or say that? Right? So they say something disrespectful. You look at them. You're like, wow, Susana, you're using some mean words there, which tells me that you're angry. And sometimes when you're angry, it means that you're disappointed or frustrated. So take a minute to calm down, baby girl. And it's better if you say that you're frustrated rather than using the words that you used. Don't talk to me like that. Doesn't teach anybody anything. It just causes the person to defend themselves, right? So a lot, and whenever you're scared or whenever you feel like you're being criticized, your brain immediately goes into defensive mode, right? Fight, flight, freeze. So the more that you say, don't do that, or you speak harshly, or you kind of lose your mind with your baby, the more you're putting their brain into a defensive point of view, right? So be mindful when you are setting a boundary or when you are teaching your child to respond or act differently, to think, am I allowing them to connect with me, or am I making them protect themselves from me? And if you are screaming or warning or telling them, if you don't do this, then this is not going to happen, then most of your children in their black and white thinking, because in that moment you have told them that they're bad, most of them will defend. And depending on their personality, they will defend in different ways. Some of them will shut down and do as you say. And I don't know if you want to raise an adult that does everything that everybody says to them and doesn't think for themselves about whether they want to do it or not. You're either raising a child that is a leader and feels everything at 10, so they're screaming right back at you when you scream at them, or you're raising someone that's, you know, it's a little more observant and a little more quiet, and then they just break down into tears telling themselves that I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad. And all of these are results of when we don't stop long enough and we only talk about the behavior, we don't talk about the feeling behind the behavior. So starting today, I want everybody to start wondering, they're very angry, they're screaming at me, they're being disrespectful, they're running away from me. What are they feeling? What is the feeling? What happened right before? What did they feel that made them act like this? Because for most children and some adults, you act on your emotion. And that's never a good idea. It's good to feel, pause, and then make a decision of what action you will take. Feel and think, pause, and then take into account what action you're going to take. You as parents, you are teaching, guiding, and helping your children in the pause. And that's how you handle challenging behavior and defiance. And also the uncertainty of the time and the uncertainty of everything that's happening around them will create more irritability and more challenging behavior in your kiddos at this time. Okay, social interaction. All of you guys are worried about this, and rightly so. None of you had children younger than 5, so we're not going to talk about them, but a lot of you had children 5 and older. Please, some of you guys are fighting about Roblox and the screen, and one reason why is because your child wants to be on Roblox, because a lot of them are using it like the park. A lot of children in this age group are using that particular video game to meet up with friends. So that's not a bad use of a screen. That's actually a very positive use of the screen. So be mindful to allow them to use the screen for social interaction. Wonder with them if they're playing Fortnite, if they're playing Roblox, if they're playing Animal Crossing, all of which are actual current social video games, if they're doing it with friends. If they are, find out the friends' names. If you know the parents of those friends, help yourself. Help that other parent. You know, call the other parent and say, hey, I'm trying to keep my child to playing video games only between 3 and 4:30. Do you mind if, you know, my child and your child meets up in the Roblox at that time? So do that with your child, right? Be mindful, especially if they're meeting up with friends, to if you can at all, like that's a big recommendation. If you can at all, ask that other parent, ask your sister, because it's for some houses it's cousins that are all meeting on Animal Crossing and all these lands, right? And see that as social interaction, which moves me. And you know, if you feel comfortable, build, you know, 1 or 2 pods where they're playing with other kids, or let them do FaceTime with other kids and let them play. This is a time when we the adults have to help them meet up with their peers, whether it's a cousin, you know, and we have to do it as safely as we can, within our margin of risk, you know, of what we feel comfortable of, you know, exposing ourselves to risk. And that brings me to the question of screens. Okay, I want everybody to think of screens like you think of a plate of food. It needs to be varied. When are they using it for social interaction? When are they using it for entertainment, where they're watching, you know, TV shows? When are they using it to just play video games on their own, right? And when are they using it for school? At this time, you know, there's a lot of recommendations from the American Pediatric Association, but in pandemic times, they are being a little more flexible, right? So I would say that don't count the hours that they're on for school. And know that the hours that they're on for school, it does also have that peer, that social interaction, because it's not perfect, but they see their friends there, right? So, but don't count it as screen time, right? And then if they're playing with their friends online, once school starts, I think that, one, like, imagine if you were going to the park. If you were going to the park, you would be at the park for like, I don't know, for like 40 minutes, an hour perhaps. Do that. And then the TV shows, that's the most innocuous, right? Watching television is passive. It's not bad, it's just passive. Whatever is happening on the screen is what I am feeding my brain and is what I am processing. I don't have to be creative. I don't have to problem solve. I don't have to think, really. Everything is given to me. That's why a lot of us that are readers are no longer reading, including myself, and just ending up watching some silly reality show on Netflix, right? Because it's passive, because it just numbs us out. So of all the things, make sure that you vary it for your child, and make sure that you put it within the parameters of your routine. Okay, so I went through all of my pain points, which makes me now be able to open up for questions. So what's important is right now, press your phone and raise your hand if you want to ask me questions. And I am giving everybody the opportunity to be able to raise their hand if they feel like it, and or write a question in the Q&A, and I will go in there and read the question for us to answer. All right. Okay, tips for setting screen time boundaries, please. Perfect. Okay, so 1, I'm gonna set a boundary with all of you. So remember, if you have a question, you put it in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and I'll find you. Okay, so 1, I wanna put a boundary with you. Do not expect them to be happy or okay with your boundary. Depending on how they are for the day, sometimes they're gonna be like, "Aw," or they're gonna scream at you and be angry with you and be like, "I hate you." That should not make or break your decision. At that moment, you just say to yourself, okay, they're having a hard time today, just like I'm having, we have good and bad days. So that's what you do first. So for you, I want to take away the goal that they're not going to be upset. They're going to be upset because they show frustration tolerance by showing it to us. But the best thing to do is to make sure that each of their screen use is within the routine, right? So for a lot of kids, some of them, watch a TV show before bedtime. Well, make sure that that's part of your routine. Make sure that you don't skip it. Make sure that they count on it. For some children, watching TV is a morning thing. Well, make sure that you add it to the routine. Make sure that it's predictable. If every day I, the child, know that I get to watch 1 TV show with my breakfast and 2 TV shows after dinner before bedtime, and that happens every single day, no matter what, I'm not going to steal time on the screen because I have these 2 times guaranteed to me, right? And same with the video game. Okay, you can play video games at this time every day. And let's say that you don't know the friends that they play, online with. And this is really the realm of the 8-year-old and up. The younger ones are playing Roblox by themselves. You just tell them, okay, it's time to get off. And every time you say it's time to get off, they're going to be disappointed. They're going to be sad. Their emotional response is not what we're parenting. What we're parenting is the consistency of the rule and the routine. Their emotional response is emotional response. So all you have to do in that moment is tell them, you're disappointed and angry. I can't let you throw things around in your room. I'm going to close the door and I'm going to stay here until you're ready for your hug. And then you don't say another word, and you let them throw things everywhere. And then tomorrow is another day. It's not the video game that's making them crazy like that. I'm going to say that again. It's not the video game that's making them lose their mind. What is making them lose their mind is their inability to stop pleasure, their immaturity in managing big, hard emotion. So every single time they fall apart and get back together, that's, that they're practicing managing that muscle. And but Lena, when do we take away the video game? I think the only reason to not let them play once for 24 hours in my book, but that you're asking me, like me, Lena, the parent, is if they lie, if they sneak the iPad and use it when you told them not to, then that means that, oh wow, you're showing me that I can't trust you, so tomorrow at your time to play video games, you're not going to play video games, and instead you're going to read a book. Okay, if they are not used to a routine, how long will it take for a 9-year-old to adapt, follow, or stick to a routine? Awesome question. It could take, so anytime you change anything in a child's life and in your own life as well as an adult, it could take up to 3 weeks. We have to do, it's that 21-day rule. Children and adults have to do something continually so it becomes a habit. So this is why there's a lot of things that your children do that wait, hold on, I have to close this. This is why there's a lot of things that your children do that are now habituated because they always do it. They repeat it with you. So you're going to sit down with your 9-year-old, Elisa, let me help you a little bit. With your 9-year-old, you could sit down and you could say, okay, so I'm going to put watching television and playing video games into your routine. What I have noticed, my love, is that you tend to play video games usually most in the afternoon. So since you've done it that way most times, I think that that's the time that you're going to do it. And you're going to get the video game every day at this time, right? And when the alarm goes off, I'm going to take it. And I know sometimes you're going to be happy and sometimes you're going to be sad about it, but that's what we're going to do. And then ask your child, because they're 9, what do you think? When do you think you want to play video games? When do you think you want to watch television? And then see what they tell you. Sometimes they're very practical and sometimes they're not. All the time, mommy, whenever I want. That's not an option. Get used to saying that, guys. I'm so sorry, buddy. That's not an option. But include them and then put it in, and it will take about 3 weeks. And the first week, they'll be kind of okay. The second week is the worst week because they understand that you mean it and they hate it and they fight you. And in that moment, remember, you do not need to punish emotion. And I know it's confusing because when they show you disappointment, they cover it up sometimes in anger and they say mean things. Ignore what they're saying and speak to what they're feeling. Okay, I'm gonna answer the next question and then I'm gonna go to the raised hand. Okay, separation anxiety, attachment seem to have worsened with this pandemic. What are some red flags that will require more intervention than mindful support? Okay, so if your children are having a hard time going to bed, if your children are having a harder time going to bed, if your children are telling you that they're scared, if your children are constantly asking you, where are you, mommy? Where are you, mommy? Where are you, mommy? All of this at this global pandemic time, especially if so the ones that are doing this more are the children that have always been a little bit on the anxious side, right? If your child was easy, go lucky, has never checked in with you about bedtime, has never checked in with you, has, rarely is afraid, and all of a sudden they're very, very, very much afraid, that's when I would say, hey, speak to a professional, get an evaluation, especially if you can't be out of their sight. But the little person that often hasn't been, has off and on, leans on anxious, off and on throughout their life because they're a little more observant, they're shy or quiet, and all of a sudden is like really near you and on top of you, or actually children that suffer from allergies, a lot of children that live with food allergies. This time of heightened medical issues may be getting more stressed. They're the ones that are on top of you, right? So those, I don't necessarily think that it requires an intervention, but clingy, mamitis, checking in with me too much, is your child seeking assurance. So number one, don't avoid with them. If they tell you, no, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that, be gentle and say, wow, you're really scared to go in your bedroom. It seems like it's very dark, but we are safe. Or, no, I don't want to go outside. Even if I wear a mask, I don't want to go outside. Uh-oh, you're really scared, but we're going to go anyway, okay? So I'm going to hold your hand and we're going to do it gently. So number one, don't avoid, but be gentle with their fear. Don't tell them, no, there's nothing to worry about. The worst thing you can say to an anxious brain is there's nothing to worry about. Now their brain is telling them, she's a liar. You can't believe her. Only listen to me, and I'm going to turn on your heart and your body even harder. So if they're checking in with you extra, please make sure to say, yes, it is dark. It can be scary, but we are safe. And the way that we are safe is our house has an alarm, blah, 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 blah. Yes, the world is different now, especially with all the people wearing masks, but we're staying safe and we have this hand sanitizer and we have this mask. So it's getting back to, yes. So it's saying, yes, you're scared and I believe you. And this is what we're doing to stay safe. And then you repeat, remind, repeat, remind. But again, how do we separate what child needs a further evaluation and what child is kind of just acting like themselves? The ones that prior to the pandemic were already kind of the nervous types, and the shy ones or the observant ones, or the ones that always leaned on anxious, right now that normal way of being is just boop, escalated. So those I just want you to keep an eye out for. But the ones that are doing it all of a sudden, out of the blue, it doesn't feel like your child, that one, just to keep you feeling safe, I would definitely kind of check in with a professional. Okay, let's go over here because we have a raised hand. I'm going to unmute you. Hola.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, bien.
Gracias. Mira, quick question. ¿Puedo hacerla en español?
Sí, yo lo repito en inglés.
Okay. Okay, back to la parte del screen time y los boundaries. Los boundaries con screen time o lo que sea. Cuando yo le pongo a mi hijo un boundary, él está okay. No, normalmente lo cumple, pero digamos, cuando no lo cumple y yo le pongo su consecuencia natural, lógica, por ejemplo, la que dijiste, no me entregaste el iPad cuando sonó la alarma o cuando era el tiempo, no puedo confiar en ti, mañana perdiste tu hora de iPad. Ahí él estalla, ok, su respuesta emocional, pero se ha vuelto cada vez peor. Es imposible manejar su respuesta emocional. O sea, terminamos en un rollo cuando le pongo la consecuencia. No cuando le quito el iPad, no cuando le digo, no, ya, ok, suficiente, sino cuando le digo, has perdido mañana tu día, o no, o sea, es cómo controlar esa emoción que se sale, se desborda.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat her question. I'm going to repeat her question in English just for those of you that only speak English. So she's setting the boundaries. She's letting her child know, hey, this is what we do for screen time. But sometimes, usually he follows her prompt and he turns off the the game, but sometimes he doesn't and he breaks the rule. So she says, okay, well, tomorrow you're not going to be able to play. And then she says that he gets overwhelmed with emotion. Okay, there are two ways to manage it. So in that moment, you know, don't speak. I think for a lot of you guys, when they're like, no, why? Because in that moment, let me explain what your child is feeling in that moment. They're feeling the guilt that they didn't listen to you and stayed on longer. And two, they are feeling the regret. El remordimiento, la culpabilidad y el remordimiento are the two feelings that you are seeing that they are losing their mind, and that's why it's so big. So my response to you, and it looks like somebody else on the chat is like, yes, it happens to me too, igual acá, is say, I think that the response is very, very big, because I would say that because you have to wonder if the consequences is too big, right? So one thing that you can do to alleviate it is to say, okay, you use the iPad for 10 minutes more, so tomorrow you're going to have 10 minutes less. So it's less time. You can do that. That's one solution. And two, know that don't speak to them, because in that moment they're thinking about the future, and they're thinking about that all day. Tomorrow I'm not gonna have the iPad, and I totally messed up. And that's why the emotion is so big. So don't talk, is what I would say. Don't talk while they're crying very, very, very big, and be like, ven, te abrazo, cometiste un error y lo único que podemos hacer es tranquilizar. And then don't say another thing about tomorrow. And then tomorrow, when the consequences is available, then, because my response is not satisfying, I know, but I'm not worried about the big response, because it's regret and guilt, remordimiento y culpabilidad simultánea, both times, both at the same time. So, but if you want to cut it a little bit, tell him you spent an extra 10 minutes. So I am not, tomorrow you won't have 10 minutes. And then not another word. Don't speak, don't speak, don't speak, don't speak. The bigger the loss of emotion, the less speaking and the more breathing from you, parent, the more calming down you. Okay? I hope that's helpful. ¿Sí? ¿Me explico?
Sí, perfecto, gracias.
Okay, another question. Okay, another one in Spanish, I'll translate. My ability to, so mi habilidad de sostener o aguantar su respuesta emocional durante el verano ha ido reduciéndose, right? My ability to contain my, my own emotional response during the summer has reduced. Y por lo tanto, cada vez extendemos más los límites de electrónicos de dormir y comer saludable. Mi habilidad de sostener o aguantar su respuesta emocional durante el verano ha ido reduciéndose y por lo tanto cada vez extendemos más los límites de electrónicos de dormir y comer saludable. El verano tan largo me tiene loca, ¿qué puedo hacer? Okay, so the summer has been really, really hard because we are, you know, she's asking, my own sense of self has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So then I am allowing them to go to sleep later, to use their electronics more and not to eat as well. es lo que siempre tenemos que hacer. Tenemos que empezar. Cada vez que nos caemos, nos tenemos que parar. Entonces, when you have gotten off of a healthy routine in your family, it's okay. Allow that to be an opportunity to teach yourself, your children, and the family how to start over. But it is sort of nice in this age group, and especially if you have children over 8, right, mayores de 8, to think about, okay, guys, there's a natural transition coming, right? So know that you can sit down with your older children. Nobody under 7 can do this, but most kids over 8, over 7.5 can do this. Sit down with them and say, okay, what is the best, most fun things that you did and this time where our routine was looser? And let them tell you. And then you tell them, okay, this is what's really important for when school is about to start. So we have to practice. So again, most schools are starting on the 24th or the 31st. So it is important to just kind of include them in the planning of the routine. But then, especially for those of you where your mood, your way of thinking, your way of being has changed, right? I want you to let them know that you are also working on your mood, that you are also working on how you are feeling. It is, and tell them that we're all working on this, right? So when you're very, very upset, you have to go, uh-oh, I got really upset, and then I reset, right? Or when they're very, very upset, uh-oh, you forgot, you got very upset. Okay, let's reset. So 1, restart the routine. If they're younger than 7, let them know, okay, it's about time to start school, so we're gonna practice the routine, and every day you're gonna do one of those things less, a little bit less, all the way until you get to the beginning of the school year. And parents, the fastest, easiest way to bring yourself back to center is to find your feet, change your posture, and breathe. Set a little alarm somewhere that goes off, and you find your feet, and you change your posture, and you breathe. Do it once an hour, every hour, as often as possible. And that will bring you back to center. This new transition back to school has put a lot of your brains into fear mode, and that's why you are less able to kind of maintain yourself. But please let your babies know that you're working on it, and that you made a mistake letting them watch too much TV, that you too were being a little bit, messy with your routine planning. And if you have older kids, include them in the planning. Okay, I have 8 minutes left, so I'm going to try to answer these last 3 questions. And I think we have somebody that raised their hand. Oh, no, that's the same one. Okay. I'm going to answer these last 3 questions as quickly as possible. Okay. My 6-year-old is regressing a bit. She's fearful, asks us where we are frequently, and is constantly checking in with us, as she did when she was a toddler. How do we check in with children and their fears, even when they don't admit to it? They know that the adults are always talking about things that they don't fully understand. Okay, so create a time every day where you talk about the best part of your day, the worst part of your day, the scariest part of your day, the happiest part of your day, and what you're grateful for or what was amazing today. Most days they will be like, fine, nothing. But if you do it every day, regularly, either at bedtime or at bath time or at dinner time, On those days when they really need to talk to you, they can count that you're going to ask them the question of the best part, the scariest part, the happiest part, the saddest part, and make sure that the adults are answering that question as well. If she, a lot of the little ones are getting a little more fearful. A lot of the children under 7, because they're hearing the adults around them planning for the new school year. And this would be true in pandemic times and or in normal times. Most children start anticipating the school year. So they're actually doing in their head what, predicting the future. So for if you and the other caregivers in your home are talking about school, or talking about the differences, or talking about what's happening different coming up, make sure that if you see a little ear somewhere around you, to say, hey, did you hear us talking? Do you have any questions? And sometimes they'll say no. And then the other thing that you can do when you know that your child, so if the child asks you, where are you? Are you okay? Where were you? You could state, wow, you sound and look very scared. Do you want to tell me what your brain is telling you? If they say no, it's okay. But ask them every time, wow, you look and you sound very scared. Do you want to tell me what your brain is telling you? Or do you want to tell me what's inside of your head? Or do you want to tell me what's inside of your mind? And that's another way to ask questions. And then everybody, extra hugs, extra kisses. Let them snuggle with you if they can. They need the assurance. Okay. Do you provide virtual assessment for possible sensory integration issues, or can you recommend a place you trust that could do it virtually? I do not do sensory integration assessments or telehealth, because that is the realm of an occupational therapist, but I'm so glad that you're asking about it. There is a place in Miami called Integrated Children, and they can do, they are working through telehealth. There is also an occupational therapist and that I love and trust, and she told me to stand on my head and drink coffee upside down to help a client. I would. Her name is Linda Matthews. So Linda Matthews. So if you put Linda Matthews, occupational therapist, Miami, it will come up in your Google search. You can reach out to her and see how she's doing the sensory integration issues. But Integrated Children is a big group, and they're excellent. And there's also Linda Matthews, who I love and trust, and sensory integration is her jam. If you would like her information, we could send it to you. Email info, INFO, @stopparentingalone.com. And we will send you Linda Matthews information today or tomorrow. So just email us at info@stopparentingalone.com, and we'll give you that information for Linda Matthews. Okay, and thanks for your question. What can be expected for a 7-year-old as far as his capacity of paying attention to the virtual class? Any tips? Should we get involved? Do not get involved. All you have to do as parents at this time of online learning is set up the space, set up the computer, and set up the time. If they walk away and you happen to be nearby, sit them down. But if they're sitting in the space, the computer's here and they're like this, don't say anything. Allow the teacher to say something to your child that's like this. Because guess what? They do that in the classroom without you anyway, and they learn anyway. So don't get involved. Now, 7-year-olds have an attention span for the classroom. Every 10 to 12 minutes, they kind of lose interest. So in a real live classroom, the teacher usually has different things that they do because they know this. They know that children kind of lose interest. For a lot of them, they will be doing that on screen. But if your child kind of like loses interest and walks away or looks away every like 12 to 15 minutes while they're sitting there, that's perfectly normal, right? The online learning is difficult. I do know that all the schools they learned from their experience from March through June. Miami-Dade County Public Schools even chose a different platform. That's how much they learned from that experience. But your child will get bored or distracted every 12 to 15 minutes. That's perfectly normal. If they're not on the computer and they're doing, work, on a little book or on materials that the teacher has sent you, every 10 minutes, let them get up, get their wiggles out, and come back. Allow them to take little tiny breaks, 10 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 10 minutes on, 5 minutes off. But if they wrote it straight, if their handwriting is neat, if they answered the wrong answer, most times than not, for children in elementary school, leave them alone. Unless the handwriting is illegible, and then if it is, then you need an occupational therapist to help you with fine motor skills. All right, everybody, that's it for this week's free Zoom. There will be another one a month from now. Keep checking the events page in our website and or follow us on Instagram. You can have me for an hour and a half answering just your question and your individual concerns with a parenting consultation. I know this, it's an hour and a half for $300. That's my fee. However, for the month of August, I am letting you name your price. So if you call before the end of the month and get yourself on my calendar, you can name your price and get an hour and a half consultation with me because I know that this is a difficult time. And for some of you, there are big things that you can't necessarily ask me. In this type of setting. So give us a call, go to the website, go to contact, go to schedule, and you can set up that parenting consultation. And again, for the month of August, you don't have to pay me $300. You can name your own price. It's a bargain. All right. Until next time. Bye, everybody.